Hi everyone, the session is about to start. เรา
งั้นเอาไมค์อาจารย์ก็ได้มั้งไม่ได้ยินไหมคะอย่างนี้ได้ไหมคะมีไมค์ลอยอีก
มีครับมันในนี้มันแบบเป็นใช้ไลน์ที่แบบว่าอาจจะหายไปแล้วนะอยู่ไหนครับพี่
เทสอันนี้ดีกว่าค่ะเอาอันนี้ค่ะ
Hi. Of climate change adaptation guideline and Rosalind Amon Pitapan for the opening speech. Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good morning Good afternoon I'm sorry Good afternoon and welcome to the Thailand Pavilion I'm honored to stand before you today as we gather for a crucial section that delves into the heart of our global efforts, the intersection of nature-based solution and climate finance mechanisms. This topic addresses a pressing concern that resonates not only in Thailand but across the global south and beyond. The urban settings of the global south is evolving at an unprecedented pace and as cities expand, the imperative to fortify them against the impacts of climate change becomes increasingly apparent. Our collective challenge lies in bridging the gap between intent and implementation, with financial incentive serving as linchpin in this endeavor. In the next hour, we have the privilege to hearing from experts across sectors who will illuminate the path forward. We aim to explore how public and private sector leadership can collaborate to galvanize action on nature-based solutions and channel financial resources towards climate and nature resilience. The central theme of our discussion revolves around the architecture landscapes and financial landscapes of cities in the global south. Often, the impediment to robust climate adaptation lie in unsuitable institution arrangements and scarcity of financial incentive to drive the necessary change. Our session today seeks to unravel this challenge and pave the way for strategic and impactful solutions. We will draw on the wealth of experience from both developed and developing countries, shedding light on successful approach to deciding and accessing finance, ultimately closing the critical gap that hinders progress. The disclosure will not only pinpoint challenge, but also unveil opportunities for mobilized action, emphasizing the crucial role of public-private partnerships and the need for the skilled workforce. As we embark on this collective exploration, let us remain mindful of the agency for shaping the resilience of our city and ecosystems in the face of an ever-changing climate. I extend my deepest gratitude to our panelists and each one of you for being part of this critical conversation. Together, let us forge a path towards sustainable urban development underpinned by nature-based solutions and fortified by the strategic deployment of climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kun Rosalind, for having us and our honorable guest. Please give her big hands. And the Department of Climate Change is actually just started 2 months ago in Thailand, so this is very big for us. But not to further ado, can I invite our honorable speakers? The first one is Christina Reyes. Yes, am I? Yes. She's actually the lead net zero nature positive city from the World Economic Forums. And please, on the stage, please. Yes, the second speaker would be Anna Wellingstein. Yes, from the World Bank, Sustainable Development Regional Director from East Asia, the Pacific World Bank. And wow. So we have 2 worlds. And the second, last but not least, is Mr. Tori Coney from the ASLA, American Association of Landscape Architects. So I think we have a very good combination. And of course, myself as a moderator enjoying some case study in Thailand about nature-based solutions. So can we start with World Economic Forums first? Yes.
Well, thank you for having me today. My name is Cristina. I come from Colombia, in Bogota. And I am at the World Economic Forum. I lead the agenda on sustainable and resilient cities that we call net zero nature positive cities. And we call it like that because we add this kind of vision, mission-based approach so that we can talk about targets, what does it mean to be net zero, what does it mean to be nature positive, and measuring that progress. At the forum, we have 10 centers, each of which focus on what we call a global issue. And very recently, such as we're looking at now at the COP, cities became super central in the agenda of the World Economic Forum, meaning that we have a new center at the forum, particularly addressing what we call urban transformation, within which there's a very robust agenda on net zero, decarbonizing the built environment, decarbonizing urban-related industries, but nature positive as well. And I'm really happy to announce that we recently launched an initiative of which Kochakorn is part of, which is the Nature Positive Cities Initiative. And the main effort of this initiative is to level up the agenda of nature and to put it at the same level of the climate agenda, to quantify the values of nature, both economic and non-tangible values of nature, and to really mobilize the private sector so that we can really understand the benefits and co-benefits and associated indirect benefits of increasing nature in the built environment, and also protecting nature outside city limits so that we can really guarantee urban resilience. So this is me in very broad terms, and maybe we can then pass it over to the other speakers and start the conversation. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you so much, Christina. Can I ask you some questions quickly? What is the component of your Nature Positive City? What is World Economic Forum think that to move this forward? What is the component to your committee, your group? Yes, our group actually.
Your
yes.
group. Well, yes. So this initiative started in Colombia. The initiative was called Biodiversities. And the initiative started as a means, so my background is from the rural areas. I was sharing that with Anna. I was very much focused on protecting biodiversity in the rural areas, in biodiversity hotspots, but then no matter what I did in protecting those areas, I realized that the pulses of consumption and production and the urban metabolism was the main reason of biodiversity loss. So we can keep on protecting areas. I was devoting myself in working with indigenous communities, with local communities to declare national parks in Colombia, but then the demand drivers were still there. So I turned my career into the cities to understand how cities were actually importing biodiversity loss, to understand how cities could start assuming a responsibility in terms of protecting biodiversity outside their limits, but also could benefit in terms of reintegrating nature in the built environment. And this reintegration of nature in the built environment, that now we call nature-based solutions, landscape architects have been doing this for ages. It's a new word, but it's landscape architecture, nature-positive landscape architecture. So this initiative started just as a means to gather the knowledge that was out there. Something that the forum does really well is being the platform to detect solutions that exist and have existed for years, but to build a narrative that was easy to be integrated in the narratives of decision makers, of mayors, having mayors steering direction from the very top, promoting regulations and incentives to protect nature, to design with a lens of nature. So this is like the new undertaking very broadly. We convened a global commission of leaders that were already doing great work. And basically, we became the platform to showcase their efforts, but also to learn and to ask questions that everybody's asking, but maybe we're not voicing out in the right terms. So we don't have all the answers, but we became the platform. Like in the session we were before, there was a lot of questions on how do we really finance nature-based solutions in city? Who is financing that? Is it public spending? Is it responsibilities of the mayors? Is it the private sector just because there's a risk? In terms of natural hazards, is there an opportunity if we integrate nature in the built environment, economic opportunity, social outcomes? So all this is part of what we're working on, and I'm happy to share a bit more later.
Perfect. And we have Anna with us. So at the end, we will know what can be the mechanism that helping the initiative and to push further all the mayors and all the passionate about nature and expert together. Thank you so much for your overview of what does it take to push forward the Nature Positive Cities initiative, yes, in action. Thank you. And we'll be back to you with the discussion later on. So now can I have Mr. Torrey, a CEO of American Landscape Association. It's a big association that includes, I would say, 10,000 of landscape architects around America who's doing a very good job. And let's hear what landscape architecture can do in supporting this nature-based solution in the urban dense areas.
Thank you. I think this one works. Good. Ta-da.
Ta-da!
All right. Do you have it? Oh, good. Can you?
And everyone is like 5 in the morning for Tori at the moment. So yes.
Yeah. So bear with me. All right. Sound good?
Yes.
All right. So let's go back a couple. How do I go backwards?
The small one.
This one?
Top left.
Got it.
Okay.
There we go. Well, you don't need to see me. Okay, so you mentioned that landscape architects have been doing this work for a long, long, long time. And we are an organization that's 125 years old next year with about 16,000 members. And our mission, as you can see there, is empowering our members to design a sustainable and equitable world through landscape architecture. So let's talk a little bit about that. So let's talk about nature-based solutions and kind of what that is and what that means to us. So the remarkable potential, can you hear me? You good? The remarkable potential of nature-based solutions is apparent. By 2030, both intact and restored ecosystems could sequester 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. Moreover, you've seen through these case studies how nature-based solutions benefits go beyond mitigation. They provide important adaptation and biodiversity co-benefits. They help manage flooding, reduce urban heat islands, prevent wildfires, increase groundwater supply, and provide connected habitat for diverse plant and animal species. Oh, thank you. Nature-based solutions serve as the vital linkage between carbon drawdown and biodiversity conservation. By harnessing the inherent capacity of ecosystems to sequester carbon, these solutions not only contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gases and gas emissions, but also foster the preservation and restoration of biodiversity. The intricate connection lies in the ability of natural ecosystems, such as forests, wetlands, and mangroves, to act as carbon sinks while simultaneously providing habitats for diverse plant and animal species. As these ecosystems thrive, they enhance resilience against climate impacts, playing a crucial role in adaptation efforts. These environments promote genetic diversity, strengthening the adaptive capacity of species to changing conditions. Nature-based solutions also bridge adaptation and mitigation by addressing causes of climate change while fortifying the resilience of ecosystems and communities. For instance, protecting biodiversity forests, wetlands, and mangroves not only sequester carbon, but also safeguards against extreme weather events, acting as a frontline defense in climate adaptation. Recognizing and investing in these solutions not only contribute to the global effort to mitigate climate change, but also allows us to live with nature. Ian McCarg has a wonderful book called Design with Nature. He was one of the pioneers in the profession to help us really understand how to do that in practice. Next up, let's talk a little bit about IFLA, an organization that Koch is intimately involved in. So as I said, landscape architects design nature-based solutions to create real benefits for people and communities. Recognizing the urgent need for climate action, the global profession of over 77,000 landscape architects have united under the International Federation of Landscape Architects Climate Action Commitment. Alongside allied professions such as architecture, planning, ecology, and engineering, landscape architects represent a powerful force accounting for billions of dollars in global construction. Through our ASLA Climate Action Plan and Field Guide for ASLA members, we are scaling up our leadership in nature-based solutions to address the challenges of climate change and the biodiversity crisis. We envision leveraging our collective power and growing new partnerships with industry partners that will help us achieve a zero-emission profession by 2040. Landscape architects, as I've said, and I will repeat, are uniquely qualified design professionals who can bring all the pieces together and plan and design communities to prepare themselves for a changing world. So what does that changing world look like with our vision for 2040? Our vision for the plan is simple, but powerful, and builds on our support of the International Federation of Landscape Architects Climate Action Commitment. By 2040, all landscape architecture projects will simultaneously achieve zero embodied and operations emissions and increase carbon sequestration. They will provide significant economic benefits in the form of measurable ecosystem services, health co-benefits, and green jobs. They'll address climate injustices, empower communities, and increase equitable distribution of climate investments. And they'll restore ecosystems and protect, conserve, and enhance biodiversity. So as we increasingly experience the impacts of climate change and biodiversity crises, we know we need to act much faster. Nearly 75% of the world's emissions comes from the urban built environment, and 35% come from outside of the buildings. Infrastructure plays a large part of that, with very carbon-intensive materials used in construction. That 35% includes both living and non-living materials. So landscape architects integrate nature-based solutions in the context of highly complex urban environments, creating livable spaces for people. And landscape architects are in a unique position within the built environment industry, since our work can also draw down carbon. Now, let's talk about expanding our investments, which is kind of what we're talking about, right? Finance and investments to do this work. So while more communities are integrating nature-based solutions, those advances are not widespread. All communities need equitable access to best practices, project financing, and the landscape architecture, planning and ecology and engineering professionals who make these projects a reality. So, what's the holdup? Despite the immense potential and benefits of nature-based solutions, there are barriers that hinder broader implementation. Many national and local stakeholders and decision makers are not fully aware of the efficiency and value of these solutions, resulting in limited funding and support. A 2021 report from Finance Earth found that $700 billion annual financing gap exists in nature investments overall. A recent assessment of the nature-based funding landscape published by the World Resources Institute showed that only a small percentage of international public climate finance has been flowing to nature solutions for adaptation to climate change, somewhere between 0.6% and 1.4% in 2018. According to the Nature-Based Infrastructure Global Resource Center, on average, nature-based infrastructure is 42% cheaper. This is really important. 42% cheaper and creates 36% more value than relying only on great infrastructure.
Can you say that again?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is
I'd
a
be happy
hashtag.
to. This is the one, right?
Yes.
You ready?
Yes.
On average, nature-based infrastructure is 42% cheaper and creates 36% more value than relying only on great infrastructure.
Thank you.
You got
Yes.
it. She's going to repeat that. You probably are going to make that a hashtag, aren't you? Please, jump in.
I can compliment because our study even says that it's 50% cheaper and
cheaper.
most cost-effective. So a bit higher. We can do that tweak.
I'm going to trust your number.
50%. Let's leave it
Absolutely.
at,
Yes.
I can support that.
Can I
with
get
big-
60?
Yes.
50% more cost-effective
Wow.
than
Wow.
traditional gray infrastructure.
That
Yes.
is fantastic.
All the mayors hear this from the online as well. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was fantastic. Maybe two more. Right there. So we've clearly laid out the benefits of nature-based solutions and how they align with broader community, economic, and environmental benefits. To scale up nature-based solutions for maximum impact, it will take collective action, everyone in this room at this COP, and expertise from a range of disciplines and professionals. Interdisciplinary teams of landscape architects, civil engineers, urban planners, ecologists, you name it, must leverage the strengths of diverse design principles to drive transformational change, shaping policies and designs that prioritize nature, enhance biodiversity, and contribute to the well-being of communities and the planet. I'm almost done. This is important stuff. Landscape architects' expertise in planning and designing nature-based infrastructure reduces climate change impacts and mitigates ecological harms at local, state, regional, and national levels. Additionally, landscape architects are uniquely qualified, I think I've said that 5 times now, to lead equitable and just planning and design for all communities. So, as we all advance this work and advocate for nature-based solutions, I want to share a couple of our priorities as an organization that I ask you to consider in your own communities. There are about 5 of them. First, Appoint and include landscape architects as subject matter experts on state and local committees, commissions, and task forces. Create and or amend state local climate change action plans that use the knowledge, skills, and abilities of landscape architects to design nature-based solutions that enhance climate resilience and built environments. Third, engage the expertise of landscape architects to lead the active engagement of all stakeholders. That includes government and public and private sectors, communities, and others, when designing small to large-scale projects that address climate change. Particularly that part about engaging communities is really important, particularly marginalized communities. And it's not just the funding of the project, but it's the maintenance of the project in the out years that is just as important for policymakers to understand. So it's not just the ribbon cutting, it's the work that happens 5 years after the ribbon cutting has happened. Fourth, for public projects, use the Sustainable Sites Initiative rating system to guide, evaluate, and certify a project's sustainability in the planning, design, and construction and management of landscapes and other outdoor spaces. And finally, advance state and local policies that support and promote climate-positive design for publicly funded projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tori. And I will add more 10 landscape architects. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll sign you up. We'll get
Yes.
you another little pamphlet.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, would like to tap in a bit in the reality of why nature-based is so good things, why it's not happened, and why it's so slow. Actually, also one of the 70,000 landscape from Tori Association. And this is a little bit promotion for World Economic Forum. So I'm part of the Global Commission on Nature Positive City. And I'm very honored because there's one landscape architect with all the mayors and all the experts. That's why this is the right combination to actually push this thing forward. But in reality, the nature positive city is just beyond net zero. It's actually talking more, not only just a number that we have to achieve, but it's also about how to make the city more livable and biodiversity, and talking more than just human needs, but more pollinators and many other things that we have friends in our city. This is us. Any of your cities sinking? Jakarta, Miami is actually not divided to global south or global north. We actually are sinking. And Bangkok is one of the 10 most at-risk cities. That we hardly talking about this thing in my society. Not talking enough. And this is us in the future. This is a lot in Southeast Asia. So this is our future in 28 years. Bangkok will be gone from the map a bit. Not a bit, maybe half of it. So I think this is very crucial, and I have to push this thing forward as much as possible. This is our watershed. The whole water from the upstream have to go to Bangkok. But Bangkok don't want to get wet. This is a very strategic city, because Bangkok probably equal Thailand, but in a way it's yes. This is our daily life, and sometimes we have biodiversity right after, right? Our friends and the girl from Miami say, yeah, we have crocodile on the street as well after all the flooding. So we are very adaptive as humans, you know, like there should be policy, there should be insurance and many more, but who's helping us on the most flooding disaster is actually our people, the compassion, the empathy out there. But we need more. So this is our coastline. The Bangkok is not too far, and we are sinking. This is us. We have to touch our boundary by going to the boat for 30 minutes to really find the land that used to be there. So Bangkok policy, water government. Let's say Anna gonna give me billions, 10 billions, B2B. Maybe after this presentation, for sure. And when I'm mapping out the nature of the water flow from the mountain to the coast, this is all the water governance in my country. Put in this way, how's the money gonna go to fix one problem? It's so many silo. Even we need money, but are we ready to receive the money? This is actually not my country or my city. It's actually questioning back to all the global south. How are we going to manage this money effectively, even our own budget, right? Water means so many things. So 47 water-related departments is actually need to fix one problem. But in reality, we don't talk too much with each other. So I think this is a very challenging for the water governance from all the country, even developing, least developing country. The second thing, we either adapt or die. So when we talk about water, in my country, we talk about monkey sheep from the previous king, the concept. So we hold the water like monkey hold the food in its cheek, right? So when we're hungry, when we need to release the water, we can do that. And this is the first park in 30 years for Central Bangkok called Chulalongkorn University Centenary Park. And one of our vice rector is actually there. It's actually not possible because of design or whatever, but because it's a university, we have to establish something for the future. And this is the incline park that collect every drops of rain. Because we're flat, so we incline the whole park, and we equip with many other things. Green roof, rainwater tank, wetland, retention pond to work as one system. So it's a monkey chic. And Mr. Antonio Guterres, our leader here at COP, actually went there to give a big support for this local solution. And it's part of the urban ecosystem-based adaptation. So we need more, but we only just have second or third or three parks within these 40 years. How can we gonna achieve that? Anna, you will enlighten us after this. Yes, sorry. Well, this is our wet and dry season, and I'll go quickly. The other thing is how to make city porous, and we use a lot of waste space on the rooftop, and this is another way how you adapt the nature, how we used to live in nature on this mountainous area, do agriculture. Of course, this roof produce food, slow down runoff 20 times. And using solar roof to actually pump up the water and just drain to gravity. So you get food by just be friend with the rain, right? Don't afraid to get wet. Canal connectivity is another thing. This is our canal right now in the city. And this is the most intersection that's more expensive in my nation. It's like CBD, Sathorn, and Khong Chang Nun Si, but it's the most dirtiest canal in our city. And there's nowhere we put it in the canal. So recently, I talked to the previous Bangkok governor. We need to fix this. We have 1,600 canals that need to talk about public space, not about just carbon net zero, right? Even we get the number right, but this is what is in reality. We have to make it nature positive. So from this right now, it's be part of the hub, walkable city, and many more. So yes. I think there's so much work to be done, and this is bureaucratic system that when I want to fix one street, I have to go to talk to these people because it's not connected. So break the silo. That's probably one of my ending speech right now. So thank you. So back to Anna. Yes. Climate finance. How are we going to put this thing together? Yes, sure. No pleasure. Yes.
Okay. I'm going to tell you how, and I'm going to pay for it. So it's a bang-up talk. So great. Thank you so much, and thank you to the other speakers. Really, so much food for thought and so much inspiration. So I'll try to keep you still inspired and talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen on the ground and some of the things that we're doing. I want to talk a little bit about how to really mobilize finance for doing these kinds of nature-based solutions in cities. Talk a little bit more about examples from the flooding space and how we can use it to generate both financial as well as economic returns. Can we do the next slide, please? Thank you. So we know that public investment in flooding is really necessary. There are a lot of public impacts. It's a place where the government needs to intervene and finance to reduce future damages and losses, which always hit the public sector. The planning of investments and the prioritization of investments can also consider that it impacts land values. So when the public sector invests and they reduce the risk, they're also increasing the land values that attribute to individual private landowners, and there is some value to be captured to reinvest in more risk mitigation measures. I'm going to share a little bit of global examples as well as some work we've been doing in Poland to bring to light maybe a little bit what we're seeing. Next slide, please. So there's various ways that you can finance nature-based solutions in cities. They're all the basic ways. So municipal and state budgets make sense. It happens a lot of places. Looking at funding for planning, implementation, and maintenance, importantly. Dedicated funds that are specifically earmarked for nature-based solutions, thinking of things as special fees or taxes that might be done to make sure there's consistent and sustained financing for these measures. There can be some access to concessionary financing. I think someone before mentioned the Green Climate Fund or things like the GEF. Can tap capital markets, green bonds, blue bonds, specifically related to results on climate change and sustaining of nature. There can be all kinds of tax incentives to both raise revenues for the public sector as well as to incent the private sector to invest. Next slide, please. Just to mention, there's some really great examples out there in the region. We heard some already, but there's some really wonderful ones there in East Asia and the Pacific. First, and one we all heard a lot about, is really quite amazing, is China's Sponge City program, where they've really invested in nature-based solutions to deal with urban water problems. It's been government investment, public-private partnerships, and international collaboration. Another example is Makati City in the Philippines, their Green Building Incentives program, where they really have green building projects using tax breaks and financial incentives to get developers themselves to integrate nature-based solutions into their urban infrastructure. Next slide, please. So as we heard just now, flooding is a big deal in Thailand. So it's one of the 10 most flood-prone countries in the world. This just gives a little bit of an example of what happened in 2011. Floods affecting 13 million people, costing 12.6% of GDP in damages. On the right, on the left, the left side, it shows increasing risk from floods coming along. It shows the increasing need to release floodwaters in the city over the years, its intensification, and that increasing risk of flood is related both to climate change but also unplanned and unmanaged urban development. The government is taking action. They set out 9 investment plans valued at about $7 billion for the total value. We're working with the government to help them prioritize those investments, helping them to bring more NBS into those investment plans. Others are there as well. ADB is coming in and looking to support the government as well on this front. Next slide, please. I think both of these investments, taking care of this flood risk mitigation measures, require both gray and green and blue infrastructure. So there are times when you need some cement there to manage things, but there are times where more often than not we could bring more nature-based solutions in as well. Next slide, please. So this just gives a little bit of an example of the experience we had supporting Wrocław, Poland. In 1997, they were really devastated by floods, damaged 700,000 houses, over $1 billion in losses, 30% of the city underwater, and their flood protection system was just dramatically under-designed for the world that they were living in. Next slide, please. So the World Bank and other supporters like the EU have been working with Wrocław now for the last 20 years to really transform the risk profile of the city. We helped with recovery and reconstruction efforts. We helped build the analysis necessary for a flood risk management information system, for an early warning system, for emergency response and spatial planning, and provided $500 million in financing for flood risk management upgrades that have really resulted in reducing the average annual losses in the city. Next slide, please. But we can go even further. So it's not only the gray and blue and green infrastructure to manage risk, but it's also thinking in the future, how do we leverage that risk reduction to help finance the kinds of investments that we really need to have done? Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So what we're seeing is that the investment in flood risk management really does increase the value of land. It benefits owners and it benefits the public sector in the sense that it inevitably reduces the public cost and the private cost of disasters. So the discussion is really about how can the government capture some of that land value increase through taxes, through fees, and reinvest it. What we did in Warclaw was to geotag all the transactions to see if the flooded area where we did risk management measures really had this impact in land value that we talk about. So one thing is we talk about it intuitively, it makes sense. How does it really play out in the markets as evidence of what's possible? We looked at residential transaction data, land sales, and real estate investments. Next slide, please. And we found that the values increased faster in areas that had previously been flooded when we put into place flood risk management investments compared to non-flooded areas. So the flood risk management work that was done really was spurring significant price increases. It also shows here what happened on land transactions and how much the value of the land transactions changed over time in areas that had flooded in the past and had risk management measures, and areas that hadn't flooded and were continuing in business as usual. Next slide, please. Urban planning played a big part in what happened. They had a Spatial Planning Act in 2003 that said plans can only be approved if flood risk mitigation is in place. So this helps really expedite the process that real estate developers and investors would go through when they're thinking about investing in an area that in the past had been really problematic from a risk point of view. The plans give surety and transparency related to flood risk. So investors and buyers know the extent to which flood risk has been mitigated if there is a spatial plan in place. Next slide, please. When investors are buying in areas that had flooded, investors then more often than not would put their money where there was a spatial plan. 78% of the time they bought in an area that had flooding problems in the past was where there was a spatial plan. So they were really using it as an entry indicator, compared to 43% of the investments in non-flooding areas where investors really looked for those spatial plans. Next slide, please. So the end of the day, what we see is that public investment in flood protection has really resulted in land value increases and enabled opportunities for land value capture and Warclaw through things like increased tax revenues. We see the $500 million in public investment over 20 years resulted in really reduced flooding risks for the city. Based on the reduction of average annual damages alone, the investments were super well justified. But the public investment together with a spatial plan has had the effect of encouraging and incentivizing real estate investments in the city in previously flooded areas, and enabled these lands to sort of catch up with the rest of the market in terms of land sales as well as residential transactions. And the land value generated from these public investments, besides the reduced risk, is estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And this is not even going to the intangible benefits that I think Christina talked about from nature-based solutions. The aesthetic improvements along riverfronts and parks and walking pathways, the inspiration this has given to the tourism industry in the city, among others. So just to wrap up a little, so climate change is a threat to cities. It's a big deal, right? And there's a real need to invest in both hard and nature-based solutions to begin to manage that risk, to help the cities adapt to that risk, both in terms of their economies as well as to how individuals live and how they're impacted. And managing those threats can have major economic benefits, and we often talk about the economic benefits, so they're an important area for public investment, but there's also a financial flow that comes from that, and there are also really important private benefits. So cities can look at that private benefit in terms of the land value and how do you recover some of that, balancing the amount of public investment that reaps results for the public, and the amount of public investment that's turning around to be a private citizen's own benefit. Cities can really capture some of this. It's important to drive some of those investment costs. We've heard already in the COP this week, and you'll continue to hear these humongous numbers around what needs to happen in cities and in general to manage climate change. And so I think one thing is the World Bank. We're happy to be here. We're happy to be expanding our financial capacity to help. But I think also when we talk about bringing the private sector to invest, it's not just the big private sector, but thinking about private individuals and how those reflows can help drive us forward for a more resilient and nature-positive city. Thank you very much.
Yes, please give Anna a big hand. Anna, can I ask quickly something? How could you make sure that the money that maybe you give to Thailand or any country is actually channel to the right solution. I'm sure the finance mechanism sounds very right, but how could you make sure that it's not invest in too heavily great infrastructure than NBS?
You hear me? There you go. Okay. So one of the things that we really try and talk about with the World Bank is not just that it's financing, but it's also technical assistance and the best global knowledge. So something we're talking extensively with cities about is to what extent can you combine both of those solutions? Sharing examples from other parts of the world, sharing how positive it can be in terms of much more cost-effective adaptation measures, and also a lot of other benefits for cities themselves. So typically we start out with a discussion of what other cities are doing that have been quite positive, the returns on them, and what's available for people. It's also very positively perceived by citizenry. So some of the things the World Bank always does when we invest is we look at the economics of the investment, not just the financing. We look at the economic returns and what's the most positive way. We see that it's a technically viable solution, and we want to talk with citizens when we're doing it to make it sure it's something the community really wants. And I think when you bring those three things together, you're going to get a more holistic solution than if you're just going straight to the cement.
Thank you, Anna. And please include landscape architects in your fifth members.
I'll
Yes.
make them their own pillar for after this session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is great. Yes. Can I have a question from the audience? This is okay. Sure. Yes.
Hi, Simon Hammer from Alluvium. Hi, Simon Hammer from Alluvium. Thank you for all the presentations. It was really insightful. My question's for Anna. Just regarding that example from Poland, it wasn't entirely clear from me what the nature-based solution element of it was. On face value, it looked like a lot of grey infrastructure, like dry basins. In my view, we should never have dry basins. A basin should always have a wetland in the bottom of it. Is a great example of using that space in the inter-event period. But obviously you had a limited time, so please expand on the MBS elements.
And Christina and Tori can help Anna as well. She's yes, please.
So I'm happy to. So we really didn't get into the technical solutions at all. The point of the presentation was really to talk about how it impacts the financing, how reducing those impacts reducing the risk increases the capacity to finance. So I think in terms of NBS solutions, there were green areas that were included in it. There were sort of natural runoff areas that were included as part of the investments. And I think importantly, even some of the soft measures around emergency response systems and measuring risk, while they're not typically in MBS, I think they all allow you to control the risk in a much more cost-effective way and a much more measured and calibrated way that can also reduce your cost and have better results. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we have one question here.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa Richmond with Architecture 2030. I was fascinated by your comment about what is essentially a local improvement district, harnessing tax on the improvement and that comes from resilient investment. And I'm wondering, did you compare the perceived and actual benefits of green versus gray resilience infrastructure? And is there any difference there in terms of the market reaction to those?
Thank you.
So it's a great question. I don't think we did. I can, in my mind's eye, imagine and hope that it had a more positive reaction, but we didn't do the work. But it would be fascinating to see how it responds. In today's world, I mean, that example goes back a ways. In today's world, I think you would have a more positive response, but I don't have the data for there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
Hi, I'm Maurice from the World Bank. I live in Laos, just next to Thailand, so really quite impressive to see what Thailand has done. It's actually a question for you. So Bangkok has to make a great transition in the next 20 years, and so just wanted to get a sense of how the governor or the government is involving people in that transition that they need to make, because it looks like the situation is going to be quite dire.
Oh my gosh. And specific, can we do many city? Because, yeah, maybe you can share with more. Yeah, you go first. I will call someone who can answer the question to the floor soon. Yeah. The question is, how can we make that transition from like the city like Bangkok and many other cities to go to become more nature-based solution? Do you have any plan for that? And how do you involve people in that
Design.
process?
Okay, yeah. Well, I don't think that I have the right answer, but I can try. Actually, I was in a panel this morning where I was advocating again for a top-down approach that has been left aside from a bottom-up. I come from this very bottom-up approach, participatory design of cities, but more often than not, having a leader that is elected by many people and many citizens, steering the direction from the very top, appointing a chief landscape officer, appointing a chief resilience officer, developing the right policies and incentives so that nature-based solutions can become a default for the private sector when they build the cities, for the developers, for the investors, is super important. That on the one side. Of course, the participatory design and development of cities is fundamental. I'm not very familiar of the case of Bangkok, but for example, we are also working with cities in Colombia like Barranquilla, where the participation of the community has been fundamental in terms of, first, valuing the ecosystems in which any urban development is being made. Second, being involved in the design. Third, also understand, for example, for people that are not born in cities like Bangkok and Colombia, that are not facing the risks necessarily, to be more engaged with this process. So, for example, if you compare a city like ours, cities that are biodiverse, cities that are very close to risks, communities are very prone in terms of being involved, in terms of participating in the process, in terms of being very vocal on what has to be done, and in terms of environmental movements. When you come to a city like Dubai, I don't know if there's some locals here, but there is something about the lack of connection of the values of nature, because you were not born in a city where nature was evident. So we also have to understand that when we promote nature as a default, nature as a value, it also comes with some kind of natural education, or the opposite, kind of an environmental amnesia that we really have to nurture. We really have to nurture this and be more contagious on the values of nature, on how people have to be involved and why. What is the benefit for the communities? Why is more important to build with nature than not to do it? And what is the return not only on investment but on well-being, right? But it's tricky. And just I have an anecdote. We were promoting, so we have a very nice community promoting mass timber building and building with wood. But for a lot of communities, building with wood means coming back to poverty, coming back to very basics. This vernacular architecture that we're celebrating in a lot of panels. For a lot of communities, this doesn't mean progress. They want concrete. They feel safer with concrete. They want glass, they want to have a car. So I think that the cultural aspect of promoting this, of course the participatory aspect is very important, the literacy aspect is very important, and the leadership aspect from all levels is also very important.
Thank you, Christina. Yes,
That's
Tori.
really good. Just to pick up on this, so in my job I get to travel around and see all kinds of projects and learn about them. So it's interesting you mentioned the vernacular landscape, because I do think that is important to communities. Every community and every sort of project has a different landscape vernacular. But this one particular project, Magic Johnson Theater in Inglewood, California, that was recently, about 5 years ago, redeveloped. And it was led by landscape architects. And the first thing that they did was they met with the community to understand what they wanted from the space. They also wanted to understand how they use the space so that when they were going to redesign it, they could maintain some of the functionality of the space that the community valued. So this is a very blue-collar community where people worked, 12-hour days, and the only time they had to sort of use this park was in the evenings. And so you would see people, this was before, during the planning, they learned this, the landscape architects learned this, is that people would use this as a place to walk around the park to get exercise. That was the only space they had in the community to get exercise. So this is nature-based solutions, co-benefits, health and wellness being a part of the design process. And so when the landscape architects learned this, one of the key things that they had to maintain was a pathway and create a trailway for folks in this community to continue to get exercise. They also wanted to keep a water feature. So there was a lake that was there, but it was highly contaminated and polluted, wasn't maintained or taken care of. So again, they had to design and sort of redevelop this water feature, this space, so that it was healthier and more accessible for folks. So these are all things that have to be done as part of the planning process that landscape architects start with. So it can start with an idea, and certainly funding helps, but the solution isn't going to be, to design a space that's not used by people is not effective. And so the community's interest and the community's wants and needs have to be understood at the beginning. And so this new space that they've created, this new park, not only is useful for the folks who live in this community, but I also learned that hundreds of different bird species have now come back to the space because it was designed in a way that increased biodiversity and made it more accessible for both people and other living organisms. So really, really important to understand that. And then the last thing I want to say, to tie back to a point that someone made earlier about funding and how do you make sure that these things happen. Yes, it's important to advocate at the federal level to make sure that financing happens. But one of the things that we're discussing more and more at our organization is how do you get landscape architects actually elected to public office to be mayors, to be people making the decisions on how the funding is allocated. Because that's the federal government can outlay grants in these big chunks of money, these big block grants that go down to states, but ultimately it's the governors who decide where the money actually goes. And so you need more people to hold governors and mayors accountable for the allocation of funding to these projects so it's not reallocated somewhere else once the federal government hands it to the state. And the way you do that is you have elected officials, people who are elected to office, who represent the people in those communities and have their interests in hand first.
Thank you, Tori. And I really agree with both of you, and community need to be part of it. But let me share my experience working on ground that, I think I don't like coding. Yes, I just feel that you can see how messy is the organism of how we manage the water, number one. So, number two, Bangkok is not Thailand, but in a way, Bangkok governor have a limited power. And when it's come to national level, they're disconnected. So when you want to fix the water in Bangkok, you cannot do even Bangkok greater. You have to now go back to the national policy and then run to it. But this thing is so disconnected in reality. The COP is very global level, but we never talk about local and national and then the people that much. And then the second, you have to displace tons, millions of people in Bangkok. And we don't want to leave our home. Even we are part of the process, but really, how can we lead that process to find a consensus? So I think basically it's a messiness of the water governance. The second part is disconnected between local and natural level. And then the third part, how you involve people, you actually have to shift their mindset. Bangkok people used to be called amphibious. We used to live with wet and dry. But now all the urban infrastructure invested, some part of the money come from the World Bank. I'm sorry. No. We need to be developed. But the way we develop is so not related to the way the landscape dynamic work. So I think this is a very mindset shifting that we have to become amphibious again. Yes. Yes.
So, happy to talk more. My perspective might be a slight bit different. I have generally found, especially in recent years, when I've talked with communities, they're actually quite conscious of nature and how it plays out in their life. They just use different words than we might at this stage that are more sophisticated. They might not say, I need to adapt to climate change, but they're very cognizant that they're getting flooded more or that it's really hot where they live and it's getting uncomfortable for their kids. So I think a more openness and more skillful discussions with communities can bring them along. And those are more communities of scarce resources that we're usually talking with. So I think that's really important to you. We actually haven't invested in Thailand in like 30 years. We haven't lent.
Oh, wow.
So
Yes.
I would really welcome the chance to invest again in Thailand and
Yes.
actually do it in a very nature positive way with tons of
Wow.
landscape architects. So
Woohoo,
I'd
we
welcome
are busy.
that to the
Woohoo.
government. My voice to the government.
Thank you
very
so much. Yeah. So we actually at the end of the session, and you have any burning questions quickly, or otherwise I'm gonna ask speaker to have the final word. Burning. Okay, have to be burned.
Hey, hello. So hopefully a very quick answer. I'm Audrey Tim. I work with the International Association of Horticultural Producers. We represent the global ornamental horticulture industry, and we're pushing to be part of the conversation because anywhere where you have nature-based solutions, you have plants, we can facilitate the conversations that meet or lead to success. Big question, in terms of nature-based solutions and financing, how important is it that the concept of nature-based solutions is very clearly defined and articulated, both from the point of view of design, expectations, monitoring and reporting?
Okay, hold on. One more questions, and you can answer and give your final sentence at the same time.
I can build on what was just asked. So my name is AJ Glauber. I'm from the World Bank. So there's a lot of World Bankers here. Thank you. So just interested to hear what is the best example of a city that really lives with nature? I know you guys work on this all the time. So is there one city that to you is like a fantastic example? We should do more of it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have kind of two questions. Not very easy, and we have to give the final words. I give three of you 1 minute for closing as well. Thank you. Yes. You go first? Okay, yes.
I mean, that's a really hard question. And I see a lot of good examples of cities in progress. I don't know that I can think of a city that I would say does it very well yet. Boston is coming to mind as a city that is very progressive and on the forefront of trying to integrate nature-based solutions, particularly in the urban environment. The mayor there is very serious about this. She has a landscape architect as one of her chief advisors in this work, who she's hired. So I would say Boston is a good one, and there are examples in various cities that I could point to, but I can't think of a city that is there yet. I think that we're still, to the points earlier, we're still explaining what it is to people and the value of it. And so I think the more we do that, the more that policymakers understand the value of nature-based solutions, we can get to that optimal example of a city who's doing it really, really well. So more landscape architects is my last sentence.
Hashtag. So just an example. So I can't give you either the tricky question of what is the city, but I have a city in my mind that I was just impressed with that I saw recently. So I was in Ningbo, China recently, and I was impressed. It's an industrial city. It's known to be an industrial and a business-oriented city, and they took me to this humongous wetland park they had built in the city. Thousands of hectares of wetland that they've preserved because they knew it was important for the environmental quality of the city, to the water systems of the city, and they started something like 20 years ago, and they've layered in education and tourism, and I was just so amazed at the foresight of starting this huge set-aside in land in an industrial city starting in the early 2000s, and they said they realized that it was really important for negotiating with European companies to get them to come to China, which is actually a really good answer, and how it's paid off for them economically. But I was amazed at the set-aside they did and the quality with which they did it. So that one is sticking in my mind.
Thank you.
Again, hard question. And I have to say that
the cities that might be doing the best things and the best interventions are those that don't have time to market those interventions and to come to these events and show this is the nature-based solution, because they don't necessarily call it like that. It's just a resilience approach because of the need of cities that are really suffering, and the response is immediate, is technical, but is not shaped in a way that we can market it around the world. So I think that the role of organizations like ours is to detect those solutions that are happening, to celebrate those solutions, and to replicate them around the world through peer-to-peer interactions, while we really recognize those efforts and show that perhaps they can be developed as a model for other cities to follow suit. So, but I can mention my city in Bogota, for example, coming back to wetlands. Wetlands as spaces for interaction, for active mobility, protecting the flooding pulses of the city, of a city that is also used to be a big lagoon in the high mountains of Colombia. What we call in Spanish estructura ecológica principal, the principal ecological structure of the city, is very well mapped. And again, it's not called nature-based solutions, but it's basically defining the boundaries of a wetland, protecting them, guaranteeing connectivity between those very valuable natural spaces within the built environment. This is a nature-based solution. And on your point on clarity, alignment, and taxonomy of what does it mean, what is a nature-based solutions, we're working on that at the World Economic Forum to provide clarity to investors, to insurance companies, and we really want to develop a clear definition on those solutions, to aggregate those solutions in portfolios that are not that are helping us to go beyond this project-based approach in cities, right? A pool of investors, a pool of MDBs that come and solve the huge city challenge of increasing resilience, not neighborhood by neighborhood. But we need to classify those solutions so that investors can come quickly. We can fast-track investments on what can be classified as a nature-based solution. Happy to share more after.
Thank you so much. Please give bigger applause to all the speakers. Oh my gosh, this is a very idle panel. World Economic Forum, World Bank, American Landscape Association, all together at Thailand Pavilion. I'm so proud. So please stay with us. We need a good photo. This is very Thai custom. You cannot leave without good photo. Okay. But before that, can I invite Director Jongrak to give some gift from Thailand? Don't be so excited. It's very cute because it's a waterproof elephant. Woohoo! Waterproof elephant. Yes. Yes. And now you can pick and choose the color. You got the pink. Okay.